should go along with this one.
Good morning, everybody. I just want to make a brief announcement. Evie has spoken to me this morning about Esther. You know, Esther, one of our students here. And she had been in the hospital for a stroke, and she's had a few strokes. You can't hear me? Wait a minute. Hello, can you hear me now? Okay, I have to kind of look down.
Is that working?
No, it's working now. It's working now. Esther, who's one of our students here, she's been coming for a number of years, had another stroke. I don't know how many she's had altogether, but she was in rehab for a while. She's back home. And for those of you that know her, she would welcome any visitation because she's lonely. So Evie just came from there this morning, and Esther in particular did ask for visitors. So we have Esther's address up here, and please, if you have it in your heart to do this sometime this week, doesn't have to be today, but she would welcome your visit.
Not answering her phone. I wrote the phone down.
She's at home now. She's at home. She lives about 5 minutes from here on Emelita, up Laurel Canyon to Emelita. So anyway, thank you.
It's about less than 5 minutes from where we're sitting right now.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have great news. Our summer program is going to move ahead, and we have an angel who is paying for it. So it is no charge to anyone. Absolutely. And you can come for 1, 2, 3, or 4 sessions, and we are thrilled to be able to announce that. No, the angel wants to. Exactly. But with big wings and a big halo. So that's the good news for today. Thank you. It'll be the first 4 Wednesdays in July.
And so what I'm thinking is, Lana had proposed she would like to learn about how the Hebrew Bible was put together, when it was put together, when it was codified, when it became the Hebrew Bible. And so I'm thinking we have a total of 4 classes. Maybe I'll split it in 2. We'll do 2 classes on the evolution of the Hebrew Bible and 2 classes on the evolution of monotheism, how the Israelites moved from a tribal God to a universal God. And I think that would be a good program for us. Okay, so I want to get started. We have a lot of information, as usual, to cover today. We have 2 classes left, and I want to do the topic of good and evil. So we're going to do good and evil part 1 today, and good and evil part 2 next week. Oh, Lana just walked in. So I was just saying over the summer, I think what I'll do is I'll do 2 classes on how the Hebrew Bible was put together, and 2 classes on how the Israelites became monotheists after believing in a tribal God forever. Okay. So the topic of good and evil is the most difficult topic for all religions. Because if we believe that God is good, if we believe that God is a good God, then how is it that terrible things happen? A good God wouldn't allow terrible things to happen. It's a basic question. If, as we're going to find out today, if we believe that God is not good or sometimes evil, then we have no problem. How do bad things happen? Well, sometimes God is just bad and he does bad stuff to people. That we could explain bad that way, because sometimes God is evil, and he does evil stuff. Okay, well, that is one argument for next week. The question was, well, wait, I thought it was free will. We get to choose. Sometimes we do bad things, sometimes we do good things. That's a whole big discussion for next week. I don't particularly like that argument because it lets God off the hook. Right? If God sets everything up and then he sits back and lets us mess it up or do good things. And when we mess it up, God can't get involved because he says you have free will. Anyway, that's a big discussion for next week. What I want to do this week is go into basic concepts within good and evil. So, the question for all of us always with good and evil starts with, why do bad things happen to good people? That's the basic question in good and evil. Why do bad things happen to good people? And we're going to find out in a minute. There is not a whole book. You're very close. You didn't read that book. You read another book. You read a book whose title is When Bad Things Happen to Good People. You didn't read a book that says Why Bad Things Happen to Good People, because that book doesn't exist, because we don't have the answer to that question. Kushner wrote a book that says When. Already presuming, look, the bad thing happened, now what do? How do you get through it? And we're going to find out in a minute, Judaism doesn't have an answer to the question of why. But other religious systems do. And so we're going to look at those today. And so that we understand that tradition versus what Judaism says. And then next week, we're going to get into the particulars about good and evil with regards to Judaism. Okay, so the first thing to understand is that when we look at good and evil, the oldest tradition that we have about it is from the religion that we call Zoroastrianism. And Zoroastrianism was a religion from floating around the ancient world that becomes the religion of Persia, and before that, Babylonia. And the way that it explains evil is that there is a good God up above, and then there is a lesser bad God underneath. And the good God in Zoroastrian is named Ahura Mazda, and the bad God is named Angra Mainyu. Angra Mainyu means evil spirit. All right. So Ahura Mazda is responsible for all the good in the world. Angra Mainyu is responsible for the evil in the material world where humans live that humans do. Now, under this system, it's very easy then to explain why do bad things happen. Because there is a lesser deity who's bad, and he allows bad things to happen. Oh, okay, now I understand why bad things happen. Our system doesn't allow for that, right? God is all by God's self. He's the creator of good and evil. He does good and evil. Everything is from God. So that makes it very difficult for us. So, Ahura Mazda is responsible for overseeing the good in the world. And then there's a lesser deity who creates problems in the world, in our world, in the material human world. Okay, as we move forward in history, Plato and the Greeks adopt some of the ideas from Zoroastrianism. So for Plato, there is a creator God, and then there's also what we call a demiurge. And a demiurge, that we're going to hear that word a lot now. Demiurge means basically craftsman, artisan, a worker, someone who builds. And for Plato, the demiurge is not an evil god, but the demiurge is the one who crafts life here on earth. There is a creator who establishes everything, and then there is a worker underneath him. And the worker crafts what we have here on earth. All right. Yes. That craftsman is evidently not very good. Fire him. Okay. As we move then through history, we get into then, because by this time we're moving into CE from BCE. And Jesus has been born and Christianity has become a thing. Remember that Paul is executed in 60, and Paul has reformed, has taken Jesus' teachings and formed them into a consistent theology that we now call Christianity, or really Pauline Christianity, Christianity as formed by Paul. And the major teaching, of course, is that Jesus' life represents him coming to earth to atone for human sin. His death atones for human sin. Of course, as Jews, we reject all that. But that is the consistent theology that Paul has put out. And it spread through the ancient world like wildfire. It was a very appealing message that Jesus was a God of love, and that your life in the next world is going to be so wonderful, it's nothing compared to this world. Remember that Judaism is completely focused on this world. Yes, the rabbis have statements about, look, all of Israel has a place in the world to come, and things like that. The world to come, heaven, and Gehenna, those are kind of late additions for us. And yes, they're there. But the rabbis are much more focused on how are you leading your life in this world? Christianity is much more centered towards heaven and the next world. We see that because one of the ways we see that, if you have been to Christian funerals, in some ways they're almost like a celebration, because the deceased has now gone to be with Jesus in the kingdom of heaven. I remember once I did a joint funeral with a minister. The mother was Jewish, but she wasn't practicing, and the husband obviously was not Jewish. And the grandparents asked me to be there at the funeral for them, the grandparents of the wife, who was Jewish. And so we each, it certainly was different. It was I stood up to say some words. He stood up to say some words. And my words were very short. This was a child, a 2-year-old child who had died, which is just impossible no matter what. And so I stood up and I talked briefly. And I said, in our tradition, it is taught when Aaron lost his 2 sons, Nadav and Avihu, the next line says, Vayadom Aharon, and Aaron was silent. Because there was nothing to say. I mean, first of all, Aaron's not going to question God's judgment, but it's so incredibly difficult. There's nothing that you can say. And so I just spoke briefly. And when I left, the minister looked at me and said, that's it? That's all you're going to say? And I said, in my tradition, this is where we are. And then he stood up and did the whole thing about praise and, praise our little brother and blah, 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 blah. And the people were, and everyone was, yay, blah, blah, blah. And I kept thinking, this is not going to work for this mom. Even though she was saying, yeah, blah, blah, blah. I said, this is not going to work. I know it's not. As soon as the minister was finished, she was screaming, my son, my son. I said, aha, that's where it is. That's where it is. And we went to graveside, and I took the grandparents to the side because they desperately wanted to say Kaddish. And I took the grandparents aside. And when all the other Christians saw that I had taken the grandparents to the side, they started coming over. They didn't know what. They were like, wow, what is this? What is this? And they thought it was so moving that they stood there and they waited as I explained Kaddish, and they wanted to be involved in it. Because for them, it was, on the other side, it was going to be a celebration as they were lowering the casket. And anyway, the idea of our world and the next world. Yes, Gary.
So a number of years ago, Rosie and I went to the funeral of our. A number of years ago, Rosie and I went to the funeral of our next door neighbor, and it was a Christian service. And at the end of it, when everybody was speaking at the when everybody was speaking, they all mentioned, "We'll see you in the afterlife, Mama."
Yeah. So what I'm saying today in no way is meant to denigrate Christianity. They have beautiful traditions, and whatever works for them in their religious outlook on life, good. However it works for them is wonderful. It's not our way. That's all I'm saying. It's not our way. And it's a very clear difference from our way. Our way focuses on the here and the now and how we lead our life today. Okay. So now we're going to get into some ideas about Christian Gnostics. The word is Gnosticism, Gnosticism, Christian Gnosticism. And basically what Gnostics believe is very similar to what the Zoroastrians believe. The Christian Gnostics believed that there was a good God and a lesser kind of evil God. And that's how evil got into the world. Again, it's so easy to explain evil that way, and everybody gets it and say, okay, that's fine. There's a bad deity that does all this bad stuff. I get it. That's why bad stuff happens. Okay. So the first person we have to talk about is a man named Marcion of Sinope. Marcion of Sinope. And he lives around 150 CE. 150 CE. So early Christianity. Constantine, the Emperor Constantine, converts to Christianity when? Around 300. Very good. And then Theodosius I converts the Roman Empire to Christianity as the official religion after him. So, yes, very good. Right around 300 CE is when Christianity really takes off. So this is early days of Christianity. And what Marcion of Sinope says is that there is a good God up above who is Jesus, and he is responsible for all the good in the world. And then there is a bad God who is responsible for the evil in the world. And guess who the bad God is? The Old Testament God, according to him. And who is the Old Testament God? The Jewish God. Well, so it is the Jewish God who is responsible for all the evil in the world, and Jesus is responsible for all the good in the world. Marcion of Sinope was clergy in the in early Christianity. Is he a Roman? Good question. I don't know if he was a Roman. Someone wants to look that up. Yeah, Marcion of Sinope, Synope. Yes.
My question is, how then did the people living then look at Jews?
How then did the people living then look at Jews? Well, very clearly. Very clearly. We haven't gotten to medieval Judaism. We haven't really gotten to the medieval period in Judaism or the medieval period in Christianity yet. That's going to probably start with the advent of Islam around 600. But certainly, when the Romans think about this for a second. When the Romans conquered Judea, Herod is put in charge in the early years, in the last years of BCE. Herod is put in charge. Jesus comes along in the early years of CE. He's executed around 30. Paul's executed around 60. What was the sort of demographic in terms of population of Jews? Were we a large group, a small group? What was our situation? Lana?
My understanding is that Judaism was a proselytizing religion at that time. And so in Judea, there probably was the population of Judea, but my understanding is that 10% of the Roman Empire were Jewish God-fearers, but not necessarily practicing Jews, which made Paul's idea more promising, because these people did not want to do Shabbat and circumcise and rite. So you don't have to do that. So he got all those people.
Unfortunately, I don't remember the time period, but unfortunately, I don't remember the time period. But at some point in time, maybe when the what were the people from Turkey called years? Ottomans. Thank you. Perhaps during the Ottoman Empire, the Jewish population in around the Middle East was so large that for the high holidays they had to wave banners so people know where they were, when to stand, and when to say Amen.
Very good. Rosa, did you want to comment?
Yeah, he was born in Turkey apparently, but I think he was a religious person, and the date you had 150, that's when he was, preaching his gospel, or the church claimed he was a heretic. So, and it wasn't until the Nicene Creed later on that they straightened all those heresies.
Getting to the place where he is considered a heretic. So Jews were a large population in the ancient world, comparatively speaking, right? All of what we consider today Israel was basically Jewish. We were a very large minority population in the totality of the ancient world. So when the Romans come in and they take Judea, and there are many Jews who are carried off into slavery, there is a fairly large population of Jews in Rome from those who were brought over. You see it on the frieze, Frieze, at the top, where the Jews are. Ark of Titus, where the Jews are shown carrying the candelabra, the menorah out from the great temple. So the question was, what did people think of Jews? As Christianity spreads, what people thought of Jews became less and less and less, right? They started not liking them because Christianity taught that Jesus was killed by the Jews. Jesus was executed by the Jews. So little by little by little by little, people had a very negative opinion of Jews. And then, of course, we know that explodes during the Middle Ages, and we are persecuted terribly, terribly. But in the early days of the Roman Empire, they had a bad view of Christians too, right? Because the Christians were executed in the gladiator rings or whatever. So it isn't until Constantine and then Theodosius that all flips. Yes, Lana.
Come to this side of the table. Okay, so in 70 and I think it's 135, there's the wars with the
135 is Bar Kokhba.
Bar Kokhba, right. This is where the schism of between Christianity and Jews start, because of being a Jewish at that time, because that's where the wars were. The Romans didn't like the Jews at this point, so the Christians, Jewish Christians, wanted to differentiate. We're not like them. We believe something different, and so Pauline stuff starts to come in, and by 135. Anti-Semitic statements are happening in the church.
Okay, very good. So at 135, we have the beginnings of Jewish Christians. Yes, and he is 150. Yes, okay. Remember, Hadrian is emperor in 135, and we have the Hadrianic persecutions against Jews. Yes, Ken.
When I was younger, it was explained to me that the Jews being in Rome for all of those years before Christianity, they kind of set the stage for there being a single God, but they didn't take converts, whereas the Christians took everybody.
When you remember, go ahead and give back. Okay. So very quickly, very quickly, there in the ancient world, there were Jews who remained faithful to Judaism, and there were Jews who were following Jesus. The first Jews for Jesus, literally. Jesus had a congregation of Jews. He was a rabbi preaching to Jews. He wasn't preaching to non-Jews. He was preaching to Jews. He just was preaching Judaism that wasn't normative at that time. And so those Jews who were following Jesus had a different philosophy, and they were the first Jewish Christians. They were called Nazarenes. And once Jesus is executed and Paul dies, the Nazarenes move out into different communities. And eventually, they have problems and die out because the Jews don't accept them, nor do the Christians accept them. So they were called Jewish Christians because they were sort of in that middle ground where they felt they were Jews, but they believed in Jesus as Messiah, which absolutely eliminated them from the possibility of being Jewish. Okay, let me move on because we still have more to cover. So Marcion has this philosophy, and it's called the Marcion heresy. The Marcion heresy, that Jesus was the good God and the God of the Jews is the bad God. And Marcion is labeled a heretic by the church, and Christianity does not accept Marcion's beliefs. As we are moving through history then, we come up to, very quickly, in Persia, a man named Mani, M-A-N-I, and he founds a movement called Manichaeism. And it's basically the same idea. There is a father of greatness up above with a prince of darkness underneath, and the prince of darkness is not Satan, but a prince of darkness, and that's responsible for the material world that we live in and the bad things that happen to us. Following Manichaeism, we have Catharism in 1150, and the Cathars had the same idea. The good God was Jesus, and the bad demiurge underneath was Satan or Satan. Now, interestingly enough, for our discussion here, we know of the Inquisition as it applies to Jews. The Inquisition went in 1492, was invited into Spain during the Alhambra decree by Ferdinand and Isabella, and it went after conversos. The Jews had already the Jews were expelled, and the Inquisition was brought in to go after conversos and other Christians. Okay, then it was brought into Portugal for the same reason a little bit after that. But the Inquisition had already been in France before that. And in France, the Inquisition went after the Cathars. C-A-T-H-A-R-S. They went after the Cathars, and there were several other Christian Gnostic groups that the Inquisition went after in France. Why? Because these people were not practicing Christianity the way the Pope wanted. Which is the same reason the Inquisition went after conversos. Are you practicing Christianity really? Or are you just making a show of it? We know all about that. It's been discussed many, many, many times. I don't have to go into it. But we understand that, as I've said many times, the Inquisition went after conversos. It didn't go after Jews. Jews were already heretics. They were already expelled. They were already out of there. The Inquisition, the point was to go after Christians anywhere who were not practicing Christianity the way the Pope wanted Christianity to be practiced. And the Cathars, because they were Gnostics, meaning because they believed in a good God, Jesus, and they believed in a demiurge, an evil, lesser God, and in this case, Satan or Satan, that's not normative Christianity. And so the Inquisition went after them. All right, so we have all these groups here on the right-hand side who are explaining the evil that comes into the world by a lesser deity or a lesser spirit or a lesser force that acts antagonistically, meaning it acts against the good God who is up above, who is responsible for all the good in the world. There is a lesser, so evil is lesser than good. That's number one. And that is responsible for the material world, as opposed to what kind of world? The spiritual world, yes. The creator up on top, and then the one who sort of messes with creation. So the lesser deity, the lesser spirit, the lesser energy, is working against the higher energy. And the lesser energy is sort of, now, okay, how do I create things again? Because it's only the good God that can really do all of creation. So the lesser deity messes up creation. Okay. Yes.
What is normative Christianity at the time? Because I'm familiar with the Nicene Creed, which got rid of heretics, and it was established during the time of Constantine, which is in the 300s. But what happened after that? I mean, what is normative Christianity if these are like offshoots? And
Exactly what you just said. Based on the Nicene Creed. Normative Christianity. And then, what happens to Christianity during the Middle Ages? We have a split, right? And when does that split happen? That's the Protestant Reformation. That's true. But when does the split in Christianity happen? Yes. Yes. Yes, very good, very good. So right around 1100 is when Christianity splits, and we have Roman Catholicism in the West, and we have Eastern Orthodoxy in the East. And how much time do I have? Not much. Okay, just very quickly. Does anyone remember why that split happened? Because the Catholics were charging money to go to heaven. That's why the Protestant Reformation happens. Good. Why does the split happen between Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy? It happens because of a clause called the Filioque Clause that says, that questions whether the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father or from the Father and the Son. It was a very big problem in Christianity at the time. Eastern Orthodoxy went their way. The Pope and Western Catholicism went its way. And we still have that, obviously, we still have that split today. Okay, I want to look now at Jewish ideas. So we have this, what we call here, a dual cosmology, meaning that the universe is set up in two ways. There's a good God and a bad God. And the bad God is responsible for all the bad things. Okay, we all get that. Judaism rejected that completely. Why did Judaism reject that completely? Because it said God is one. There's no other God. No, God is God, is God. There's only one. And our texts, as we're going to see more next week, are very clear on that. Lamentations says, is it not from the mouth of the Most High that good and evil are created? Judaism is very clear. God creates evil. Isaiah says it also. I do this, I do. Okay, God creates evil. So for us, it's a real problem. How? could a God who is good create evil? And if he's so powerful, why can't he just get rid of it? Why would he have created it in the first place? And why can't he get rid of it? That's for next week. That's our big question for next week. But now, as Judaism begins to grapple in the ancient world with the question of good and evil, Judaism comes up with the first big attempt is a very interesting answer, and it comes from Rabbi Yanai, and it comes around 200 CE, and it comes in Mishnah 19. Rabbi Yanai said, "It is not in our power to explain neither the tranquility of the wicked nor the suffering of the righteous." So what do the early rabbis say? We don't know. We don't know, and you know what? Our minds are too small. God is too big, our minds are too small. We have no idea why bad stuff happens to good people. It just does, and that's just the way it is. Judaism punts, or let me see, for the women who don't know football analogies, Judaism kicks, no. Kind of. Judaism just says, you know what? We're not going there. We're not going there. We're not gonna. I didn't mean to be sexist there, by the way, but I think many women wouldn't understand. Anyway, many men understand. Okay, Judaism just doesn't even try. Judaism just says we have no idea. We're not even gonna try. Kind of. So wait. So Eileen says it's okay to say we don't have an answer. Let's move on. Basically, I think if we want to give it a more sensitive treatment, Judaism says, look, the question's just too big, and we don't have answers like that. We just don't know, and so we can't even begin to try to get into it because we don't know. We don't know God. We just don't know. Now, how does Job fit in? Well, Job is a great example, right? And in fact, let me... Let's put that there. Okay, it's great. So this is a perfect proof text. So we all know, basically the story of Job is he's a righteous man. Satan goes up and says, God, he's not as righteous as you think. Let me mess with him for a little while and we will show you he's not righteous. And so Satan comes down to earth and awful things happen to Job. And so at the end of Job, which is hugely powerful, what happens? What's the end of Job? Okay, because why? He accepts it. Why?
Because he accepts whatever God gives him.
Okay. Does he talk to God?
No. I don't remember.
Remember, the question gets asked, God, why? Right? And what does God do from the whirlwind? Remember, God just slams Job from the whirlwind. And he just slams Job. And he says, excuse me, what kind of question are you asking? Where were you when I created the world? Where were you when I did this? Can you do this? Can you do this? Don't ask me a question like, God, it's just like it is an incredible rebuke from God. And so the answer basically is, we don't know. Don't ask God. We don't know.
That was a classic move when you don't have an explanation or message.
A classic move when you don't have an explanation. Yes. Now, I want to read you from the Talmud, which is after Rabbi Yanai, a very interesting exchange between Moses and God. And if I have a couple of seconds left, let me... Come on. Okay. Moses requested that the divine presence not rest upon the nations of the world, and he granted it to him. Okay. Later, Moses requested that the ways in which God conducts the world be revealed to him. Why is it, Moses said before God, Master of the universe, why is it that the righteous prosper, the righteous suffer, and the wicked prosper, and the wicked suffer? God said to him, Moses, the righteous person who prospers is a righteous person, the son of a righteous person, who is rewarded for the actions of his ancestors. The righteous person who suffers is a righteous person, the son of a wicked person, who is punished for the transgressions of his ancestors. The wicked person who prospers is a wicked person, the son of a righteous person, who is rewarded for the actions of his ancestors. And the wicked person who suffers is a wicked person, the son of a wicked person, who is punished for the transgression of his ancestors. Okay, there's a very long discussion in here, but basically what God tells Moses is, you are being punished in this world for the actions of what your ancestors did. Now, what follows in this discussions is the rabbis say, no, that's not what God meant. No. So don't worry about that. And we know that Ezekiel nullifies that you are punished for the actions of your ancestors. He nullifies it during the Babylonian exile. Okay. So now, because you brought it up, and it's so powerful, I want to read from Job. Come on. Okay, Job 38. Job 38, that's what I want. Okay, let me just pull up the first version that I can get to. Okay. So Job has questioned God. Okay, brace yourselves, everyone. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, Who is it that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? Basically, who are you to speak to me when you know nothing? Gird up now thy loins like a man, brace yourselves, for I will demand of thee and answer thou me. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if you have understanding. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Or who hath stretched the line upon it? And whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? And who laid the cornerstone thereof? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? Or who shut up the sea within its doors when it broke forth, as if it had issued out of the womb? When I made the cloud the garment thereof, and thick darkness a swaddling band for it, and break up for it if my decreed place and set bars and doors. Then it's a very, very, very long thing. Where is the way where light dwelleth? And as for darkness, where is the place thereof? That thou shouldst take to the bound thereof. Knowest thou it? Because thou wast when born? Or, in other words, basically God just slams Job. And his friends.
Because Job tried to, I don't want to say defend God, but Job tries to counter his friends' arguments against God.
Yes, but then Job questions God. And God gets very angry. And basically he says, look, you know nothing about nothing. Keep your mouth shut and don't ask me questions like that. And so and Job is such a difficult book because it asks that very, very difficult question. You know, Job, you were such a good guy. God, how could you let such a thing happen to him? And the answer is, you don't need to know. Shut your mouth and just understand, I do what I do, period. Okay? End of discussion. And so so this statement is very, 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 very well known. It is not within our power to understand the suffering of the righteous or the prospering of the wicked. It's just beyond our comprehension.
But doesn't Job come out okay?
Job ends up coming out okay at the end. He has a new family, and everything's fine. And so on the one hand, we say, oh, okay, well, at least that's good. But the problem with it is he lost his whole family. His whole other family is lost. And we say, well, okay, he had kind of a good end. You know, he has a nice family now and everything's good. But what about the other family? What about his other children who died? What about them?
So God's relationship with Job must have softened after the rebuke if Job was given another.
Yes, God's relationship with Job must have softened. Yes, Job backs down.
God let Job's children and everybody die,
Yes,
and then he softened up and said, I'll give you a new wife and kids.
kind of, sort of. God, the question was, God allows Job's first family to die, and then he softens up and gives him another family? Yeah, kind of, sort of. Yes, kind of, sort of. Kind of, sort of. Which makes...
But the first part was all a test. His friends.
Correct. The first part was all a test. Remember, Satan tests Job to see if he's really as righteous as everybody thinks he is. Remember, Hasatan, this is one of the first places that we get Hasatan, the prosecutor. Hasatan is not Satan yet. It's too early in the tradition. Hasatan is the prosecutor. And so his job is to say, well, you guys all think he's righteous. I need to initiate a prosecution here because he's not so good. Just trust me. If you take away everything that he has, he's going to curse you, God. Just trust me.
So I'm kind of curious, when was Job written and who wrote it?
When was Job written and who wrote it? We don't know either of those. Not definitively. Where does Job come in the Tanakh? Towards the end of when? What book or set of books? It comes at sort of at the end of Ketuvim, at the end of writings, at the end of the writings. Yes, that's the end of the Tanakh. And remember that the idea of Hasatan comes into our tradition late. And how do we get any idea of something like that from the Babylonian exiles?
You know, Rabbi, it's very harsh. Why did the rabbis decide to put Job in there?
So it's very harsh. Why did the rabbis decide to put Job in there? And so, any idea why Job is in Tanakh? I think exactly for the reason that we are talking about today. To understand that, you know what, sometimes there are questions that do not have an answer. And this is the big one. We don't have an answer for suffering of the righteous. We don't.
I'm getting
Okay, so I'm getting discouraged about reading all this, but part of our responsibility is to go out and change things so that bad things don't happen. So all I can tell you is this. So very clearly, as we said, our tradition is very clear about living for today. Living for today. And we don't understand why bad things happen. All of us in this room are very clearly at an age where we understand there is more time, we have more time behind us than we have ahead of us. Yeah, it's a terrible thought, but it's the reality of the situation. We all get that. Which is why Judaism is very clear. We wake up in the morning, and what's the first thing you do? You say, thank God. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. Right? And so it's very important for us to count our, as we say, count our blessings every day. We woke up today, my back's hurting, my arms are hurting, my hands are hurting, I got this pain, I got this pain. But you know what? I'm alive, and I'm going to get up, I'm going to start moving. Maybe my joints will get a little kind of oil in them. I'll feel better as the day goes by. I'm going to take my Advil or my Tylenol, and you know what? We're going to have another day, and I'm going to go try and make it a beautiful day. You're looking down at the grass, not up, exactly. So I think the rabbis very clearly knew that as well. And so Judaism is, and that's one of the reasons why Hasidism can be such a beautiful, beautiful tradition. It's not for us, but it's a very beautiful way of living your life. You see God everywhere, and you praise God everywhere for everything that God is in. It's a beautiful way to live a life. It's not for us, but it's beautiful. It's hard to solve problems that way. But it is for us that we wake up every day, and yeah, we do need to thank God that we woke up today and that I get to have another day alive with my grandchildren, with my whatever it is, I get to have another day. And I'm going to try to make this the best day that I can, because there is no answer to the suffering of the righteous. And right now, I'm doing okay, right? We have to think about our problems versus the rest of the world's problem. The rest of the world, 90% of the rest of the world today has no idea where their next meal is coming from. They don't have a roof over their head that is stable, so that if the monsoons come or the rains come, they're not going to be protected. They don't have health care, or they're living in a society where any minute the police could come after them and execute them. Okay, so my back hurts this morning. You know what? I can get through that. I don't have a problem like the rest of the world. And I think it's very important for all of us to remember how blessed we are. And I think ultimately, Job goes into question God. And really the answer is, that's an inappropriate question. It's an inappropriate question. You don't get to ask those questions. And that's what our tradition says. That's not an appropriate question. When bad things happen to good people, that's an appropriate question. How do we respond? How do we think about that? What do we say? What do we do? Why? Not an appropriate question to ask.
I think that the questioning began with Job's friends.
Yes, the questioning did begin with Job's friends, because what did Job's friends say? Job's friends say to Job, you're suffering now because you must have done something really bad in your life.
No, but first they say you wouldn't have faith in God if you didn't have all these good things happening.
Correct, right?
Business,
Right. And then they come after him and say, you're suffering because you did bad stuff and you're being punished. And the Talmud, there's a whole section in the Talmud that says, don't behave like Job's friends behaved. So if you have a friend who is suffering, you don't go up to the friend and say, this is happening to you because you did this. That's not the way, that's not our response, right? Talmud says absolutely do not treat someone else like Job's friends treated him. Okay, very good. So I think so we have one class left. We're going to go next week into the meat of the problem. And by the way, there's going to be no answer to this problem, as I just told you. There is no answer. Next week, there will not be an answer to this problem, but I'll present to you the outline of it. And so then in July, we'll do 2 classes on the formation of the Hebrew Bible, how it was put together, when it was put together, what was chosen, these kinds of things. And 2 classes on, because I really love this topic especially, when we say Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu, it's not a statement of monotheism. It doesn't say there's one God. It doesn't. It says there's one God for the Israelites. It doesn't say there's one God for everybody else. Shema Yisrael. Listen up, Israelites. Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Our God is one God. Everybody else has many gods, but the one that we worship, Israelites, is one. That changes very drastically over time, right? Because at a certain time, the God of the Israelites becomes the God of everyone. And so we have to take a look a little bit through the prophets, through the Babylonian exile. How did that change happen? What was going on that prompted Judaism to change its idea that the God of the Israelites was the God of everyone? And so you recall that V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Okay? Hillel says that's the essential teaching of the entire Torah. Love your neighbor as yourself. You don't even need the Torah. If you get that, you got it all, right? Well, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha originally was love your Jewish neighbor as you love yourself. Why? Because every one of your neighbors at that time was Jewish. You weren't living outside the land. You were living among Jews. So it was understood, love your Jewish neighbor as you love yourself. Well, you have to treat your neighbor with decency. They didn't treat me that way. Well, and so what you have, this is a great, oh God, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time. Okay, let me just finish with this real quickly, because Rabbi has to teach this class. So you just gave me the perfect example. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. And you just said, what if you don't like your neighbor? Okay. And so, love your neighbor as yourself. The Talmud already points out that that's an impossible thing to do. Impossible. Talmud talks about, remember we have 2 men in the desert. One has a canteen of water. He has enough water for himself. And so the rabbis say he's walking through the desert. If he keeps the canteen for himself, he loves himself more than he loves his neighbor. If he shares the water, he loves his neighbor as he loves himself, and they both die because there's not enough water. If he gives the canteen to his friend, he dies and commits suicide, and he loves his neighbor more than he loves himself. Therefore, love your neighbor as yourself. Hillel says that's the wrong way to think about this. It's the wrong way to think about this. Hillel says the right way to think about this is, do not do to your neighbor what you find harmful to you. So that is how you love your neighbor that has done mean things to you that you don't like. Just don't do anything to them that you wouldn't like them to do to you. Okay, I've gone over, and I'm being disrespectful. So, do unto your other rabbis. Yes, exactly.
That's your prayer.
Yes, question from back?
Was in France before it came to Spain.
Yes.
Did it start in France?
The Inquisition did not start in France, but it was brought into France early. I'll have to, you know what, I'm not 1,000% sure, let me check.
What about the Spanish Inquisition?
That's 1492.
We're gonna talk about that, or?
We can talk about the Spanish Inquisition. Rosalie, we had a question about Spanish Inquisition. We can talk about that in one of our other classes. I don't know who's,
Oh, that's it.
is this yours? Have a good class. Sorry, I don't know what that is.
Don't trust me.
I'm very lucky. I still read very slowly. I can't read now. Thank God. I'm just, I wrote something while I was writing about birthday cards, and everything was really good. I'm lucky that I can still write. They can't write my name, your Grandma Ray.
Hi, Ray, how are you?
Hanging in there.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you too, Rabbi.
There you go. Oh, I got good stuff for you today.
Thank you. Of course, that is adorable.
Oh, thank you. I printed out.
Thank you.
No,
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, thank you for visiting Esther.
Oh, you know, she was in a good mood, and she just came out of her shower, and she was.
What time was it?
It was about 1 o'clock. So, or 1:30, 1:30. And, you know, it was a very nice visit. We sat outside for a while.
She kept up when Eddie called me. I didn't go yesterday, and Wednesday, I'm bringing soup and all day.
Yeah, I know, it's 12 o'clock.
Oh, yeah, it's for me, it's for me.
Who else needs,
Oh, it's still tiny.
It is tiny. I have to eat it under the microscope.
Still have cookies? Can I make you something to drink?
I have not, I've asked an attorney, but I've not yet. Hold on, let me give you one. Let me give you this. I have a request out for you, but I have not heard back.
Okay, I met a young couple when I was very upset a couple Saturdays ago. I couldn't get up. I was really not feeling well. And I couldn't hear what the girl said to me. And I said, I'm so sorry, I need to get a cochlear implant. She pulled it out, she has one. And she introduced me to her mother. I'd like to find out who they are and get to know them because
Yeah, that is,
can I get their number?
Kabaker.
Can I get their number?
I can give them your, yes, I
Okay,
can.
so the old woman with arthritis, they'll know.
Okay.
The deaf old woman with arthritis.
The pretty young lady, that's what I would say. Okay. All right. Who needs a, Sissel, was magst du hier?
Mag 11.
All right, who else needs where are you sitting today? Who else would like, hello there.
I'm reaching out.
How'd your meeting go last night, okay? What's that? I know about stuff.
It has tremendous potential. We expanded it much closer.
Okay.
But we'll see where that goes.
Okay.
Oh, I
Here you
did get one. Oh, no, I didn't.
I didn't get, here, just take another one. It's
Okay,
okay.
thank you.
You do enough for the synagogue, we give you two
Rabbi,
things.
Rabbi, I put Esther's address on the table if anyone wants to go visit her.
Oh. Whose address is this?
Esther.
Oh, good. All right. So, I'm going to use the microphone so Susie doesn't get mad at me. Is this the last session of the year? Next week is the last section of the year. So whose coffee is that?
That's mine.
Oh, okay. I mean, if I start, having some of your coffee. Okay.
I have no table.
I've promised to you, you know what, I'm going to move it over just a little bit so I don't, inadvertently.
Just a little bit. You won't get to China.
All right. I have promised you, and I've delivered on my promise every week, that I would find something in Rabbi Goodman's presentation on the board, and that I would make a connection between Rabbi Goodman's material and my material, and I will deliver today. Oh, look. I wrote that during the break. Yeah. I wrote that I was like, there's nothing, not so much. No, they're not really into that. He has, a little bit, No. Yeah, actually. Anyway, so today what I'd like to do is to teach a piece of Gemara, to teach a piece of Talmud. I know, but it's such a nice print. He writes so nice. I'm going to leave it up there. This way, if someone from the board comes in while I'm teaching, I look very good, right? I look like a Talmid Chacham. Okay. Instead, what I want to do is I want to, and I was told that Rabbi Goodman, while he has a very nice board, that the material is a little depressing today. So then I thought, I'm going to talk about sex, and it's not going to be depressing, but I have to let you know it is. The end is. So we are going to talk about sex. We're going to talk about a husband's conjugal obligations to his wife. Then we're going to look at we probably are not going to get through all this. This was overly ambitious. A Talmudic story which serves as a warning against an inclination, a societal inclination. And then I want to share with you a creative short story that was based on this Talmudic teaching. We're not going to get to all this. But anyway, so we got to start. And we're going to start with the Mishnah, which again is the earliest oral law, and it's the teachings of the earliest rabbis. The Mishnah plus the Gemara is the Talmud. The Mishnah was finished around the year 200, and it was memorized. It was like the folks who were doing the Mishnah, included in the Mishnah, you would find Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Akiva, Hillel, Shammai, their descendants, teachers such as that. Those are in the Mishnah. Then you move on into the Gemara, and the Gemara is a storied tapestry of ideas, and as ordered as the Mishnah is, the Gemara is just the opposite. It's a hodgepodge of ideas and arguments. So what I want to do is teach a Mishnah. The Mishnah I think, reflects a tension in this society with a Torah idea. So let me tell you the Torah idea. I took a picture of the text according to the Torah, where's the Torah? here. According to the Torah, and this is in Parshat Mishpatim, which we just read a few weeks ago, the Torah stipulates what a husband's obligations are to his wife. And it's phrased interestingly. It says in the Torah, and this is verse 21, chapter 21, verse 10 of Shemot, of Exodus. Ima cheret yikach, if a man takes another wife, for him, she'era kesutav onata lo yigra, he must not withhold she'era, food, ksuta, clothing her, ve'onata, sexual relations, lo yigra, he must not withhold. So in other words, the Torah is saying if, and again, the Torah is a polygamous situation here, if a man decides he's got a little extra pep in his step, a few extra shekels in his wallet, and he wants to expand the house, I don't understand how he's going to do that. One wife, plenty. I have enough trouble staying on board with that. But if he's a better individual than I am and he says he wants a second wife or a third wife even, it is legal in the Torah. In the Torah, it absolutely is legal. It doesn't become illegal in Ashkenaz, in Ashkenazi circles until about 1,000 years ago, where they outlawed polygamy. You know why they outlawed polygamy? Because they were afraid what the Goyim would think of us. The non-Jews, the civilized Christians, the gentile Christians would look at the Jews with all their wives and say, "Oh, what heathens they are!" And therefore, Rabbeinu Gershom made a takana, a rabbinic enactment, where he forbade polygamy. That takana recently expired about 1,000 years ago. And then, but then they renewed it. They just renewed the takana. So again, polygamy was once again up for consideration, but defeated. No polygamy. Now, in Sephardic circles, actually, with the founding of the state of Israel, no such ban existed. And so, in the founding of the state of Israel, and there was already tension between the Ashkenazi and the Sephardim, and this feeling like the Ashkenazi looked down on the Sephardim. Well, when immigrants came from Morocco and from Yemen, and they came with multiple wives, it created stress and tension. They grandfather claused those people in. They were allowed to keep their families, but they did look down upon them. Anyway, the Torah says, if you want to take a second wife, you cannot withhold food, clothing, and sex. Okay, so the rabbis extrapolate, if you want to take a second wife, meaning a second wife, then certainly your first wife, if you only want to keep a first wife, then you should also give her these things, right? If you're expanding the house and going to give those things to keep for a first wife, then certainly if she's the only wife, she's entitled to these things as well. Okay? Logically makes sense. So there's three things: food, clothing, sexual relations. You have right, exactly. Rich enough and enough blue pills to you. I saw your cartoon drawings. You have got a good sense of humor, so you could. Okay, so all right. So now that idea is from the Torah, and the Torah is irrefutable. A man has, in the rabbinic mind, an obligation to provide sex for his wife. Now we're going to explore what that looks like.
We're not drawing pictures, are we?
We're not drawing pictures. Then that if I take down this nice chart of Rabbi Goodman's and start drawing pictures, then the board is going to walk in here, and then you're going to be looking for a new rabbi, right? Oh, you see what pictures this guy drew on the wall. Right, exactly. That's everyone. Rabbi, you drew it too small. We can't see. Anyway, that's a bad joke. Okay. So now, along with that obligation, which is irrefutable for the rabbis, there is a move in early rabbinics towards asceticism, meaning that the rabbis, especially the rabbis who are creating the Talmud and rabbinic life, they're not shunning in entirety the material world, but they're giving great preference to the spiritual world. And so therefore they have a problem. The problem is, if you give preference to the spiritual over the physical, can you imagine a scenario where that comes into conflict with a man's obligation towards his wife? In other words, if you're saying, study Torah, live life for mitzvot, well, could that, you can imagine that could come into conflict with the value of being a good husband and not denying a woman her rights. We're going to explore that idea today. All right, coffee break. All right, here we go. So let's say, so the rabbis are ready. Look at the bottom of page 1. This isn't a Mishnah. If you can't read it, then I can make it up and you wouldn't know the difference. Ha ha ha. Okay. All right, so you'll just listen then. Hamadir et ishto mitashmish hamita. For a man who takes a vow from that his wife may not have tashmish mita, sexual relations. So that's a big thing. Let's say a man is saying, "Wait a second, I'm very holy. I want to make a vow. I want to absolve myself of sexual obligations." How long can he make that? Why? Well, that's an interesting question about the divorce. Well, when can a divorce happen is really the question. Because he has a Torah-itic obligation to have sex with his wife. But if he takes a vow abstaining from sex because of a spiritual inclination, how long can he make that vow that it doesn't intrude upon his obligations according to the Torah? In other words, there's conflict here between priorities. There is a religious inclination, which is to refine yourself, become more spiritual, and then a physical obligation to his wife, which is explicit in the Torah. Well, so how do you do both? So Beit Shammai Omrim, Beit Shammai says, yes, you can make such a vow, Shtei Shabbatot, for 2 weeks. Man can make a 2-week vow saying, I'm off.
Which part of the month?
Yeah, exactly. Beit Hillel, that's good. Beit Hillel Omrim, Shabbat Echad. Beit Hillel says only 1 week. Okay. Then it says, let's say the Talmud, the Mishnah continues. Apropos of the husband's obligation to his wife regarding marital relations, the Talmud now mentions other aspects of this issue. So now the Mishnah goes further. Hatalmidim yotzin l'Talmud Torah shelo bereshut shloshim yom. Let's say that a man wants to study Torah. He wants to go to the academy and learn Torah. He wants to go to the yeshiva and learn. How long could he go and without his wife's permission? In other words, how long The first instance was a question of the vow. He could take a vow. He doesn't have to be studying Torah. How long are you allowed to take a vow? There's a machloket, a disagreement between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai says 2 weeks, Beit Hillel says 1 week. Now the question is, if he wants to go to yeshiva, how long can he go? How long can he disappear for? So the Mishnah teaches that he can go for 1 month. Okay, Talmidim in the Talmud Torah Shalom Bereshut Shloshim Yom, 30 days. Here, I'm going to read this in English. Now, let's say, though, that he's not a Talmud. So keep that in mind. This is someone who wants to study Torah, which is a preferential occupation, even if it's not an occupation, a preferential way to spend time, right? We want people studying Torah, says the rabbis. The rabbis, the whole goal of the Talmud is to imbue a society with a love of Talmud, with a love of Jewish ideas. And therefore, if someone wants to pursue a life that is animated by Torah study, that's wonderful. But does that come in conflict with a man's obligation to provide sexual gratification? If he wants to go to the yeshiva of the Harvard of yeshivas, which is, like it could be miles away. These people lived in small towns. And so how do these two ideas, one is a Torah-itic obligation and one is a rabbinic ideal, when they conceive, how can they function together? So they're saying, wait a second, we want you to go study Torah. We want you to become involved in the life of the ideas of the sages, but you can't forget about your wife. So, 30 days, which is interesting. The 30-day position is more than a vow, right? If you take a vow, which is not studying, you're just taking a vow. Oh, people do vows all the time. Even today. People have asked me, this year, someone asked me if they said they made a vow in a time of religious crisis, in personal crisis. People make vows all the time. Judaism really doesn't like it. That's why we have Kol Nidre. But anyway, vows, we recognize the efficacy of vows, but we don't prioritize vows. We don't like vows. They exist. We got to deal with them, but we don't prioritize them. So Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel says only 1 week. You want to if something happens, then I won't have sex with my wife. It's a vow. Beit Hillel says, great, 1 week. After 1 week, honey, open the door. And otherwise, it's time for a divorce. Okay, or it could lead to a divorce. In other words, a man does not have the right to refrain from sexual obligations toward his wife under the banner of a vow for longer than Beit Hillel says a week, Beit Shammai says 2 weeks. But the rabbis say, well, Talmud Torah was studying Torah a month because Talmud Torah is preferential to vows in the rabbinic life, right? The rabbis like the idea of other people studying Torah and studying Jewish ideas more than they like the idea of people doing vows. They don't like vows. It's it's there, but they don't like it. Okay. Yeah.
Does the woman have the right?
Does the woman have the right to what?
I don't want more than a week. I need a month. As long as I want.
Right. Right. So the Torah actually doesn't. This is the truth. Is the Torah doesn't imagine. Here's the thing: the Torah exists in a Sex and the City world where they wait a second, a woman wouldn't want to have sex with her husband all the time. The Torah can't imagine such a a construct, right? It naturally it doesn't really imagine. It shortchanges women in terms of their agency over their own bodily needs. Okay? All right. But now the Mishnah continues. So just keep in mind the 30 days. Here, I'm going to park this on Rabbi Goodman's chart. Here. We're going to do vows. Here, this is good. This won't get me fired. I can write this down.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I wasn't kidding about what time of month, because you've got,
It's complicated. The truth is, I don't know. But it's assuming that you can't have sex during the menstrual cycle.
right, and 7 clean.
It's not that those, like, how they counted days back then is like, so I haven't done the study of putting these two ideas together. Okay. So vows, Beit Hillel, one week, and Shammai, I'll go to English, I heard that. Shammai, 2 weeks. Okay? Talmud Torah, that means the study of Torah, 30 days. And then the Mishnah continues, Hapoalim, laborers, Shabbat Echad. Oh, here, I'll just read it through. Hapoalim Shabbat Echad. Now, then the Mishnah says, what is the set interval that's stated in the Torah? Men of leisure. That means men who don't work. Right. Well, how long can they... Hatayalin b'chol yom. It says every day. It does say that. Hagamalim, gamalim, donkey drivers, one time for 30 days. Oh, I'm going back and forth here. Oh, okay, wait, hold on. Donkey drivers once a week, camel drivers once every 30 days, and sailors once every 6 months. So the question is, and the Mishnah acknowledges it, so the Mishnah says, Torah scholars 30 days, laborers 1 week. The set interval defining the frequency of a husband's conjugal obligations to his wife stated in the Torah, unless this person is obligated other ways. Men of leisure, they could be demanded to do it every day. Laborers twice a week. So if you got a 9 to 5 job, sorry honey, I'm tired, you still have twice a week you have to do it. Donkey drivers once a week. Why do you think donkey drivers once a week?
Because they're not home.
They're traveling, they're not home. Okay, now camel drivers once every 30 days. Why? They're right. Those are like the trucks of the long hauls, right? Sailors once every 6 months. Okay, and then the Mishnah ends and says, "This is the statement of Rabbi Meir," and then it says again. Eliezer, students may leave their homes and travel for up to 30 days in order to learn Torah. Okay. And then it says, the Gemara then asks, if they went with permission, how long can they go for? As long as they want. In other words, is this a cap? And this is without permission. In other words, a man doesn't have to ask to be gone. If he's going to be gone 29 days, he doesn't have to ask her, according to the Talmud. But without permission, no limits. Oh, with permission. Sorry, I'm a little over. Yeah. You have to take a poll? Oh, yeah, no. I'm sorry. That the Torah was dealing with a case of taking a second wife and saying the first wife had, because she's losing some of her status because she's getting a second wife, she still has the right to 3 things: food, sex, and clothing. So the rabbis infer from that, well, certainly if he's taking a second wife and the first wife has a right to this, and certainly when she is the only wife, she also has the right to these 3 things: food, sex, and... Right, but the Talmud now is back in the business of assuming one wife. Okay, so yeah, right, yeah, you're right. That'd be you need like an iPhone for that. Like, okay, do I have permission for how many days? And you gotta, maybe there should be an app for that. You know, like how many days I can travel. You put in your occupation, camel driver, and how many wives you have. And then it tells you like what, and then you can order, like you can connect to Amazon, what kind of flowers you need to order for your wife when you come home. And how to schedule. And it could be related to like, the pill website, maybe some like oils or whatever, we could have lots of things here. It's assuming these are rigorous men. Well, yeah. Okay. Here's what's interesting here. With permission, no limits.
Go away for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years.
Right. Now you could imagine a situation where she gives permission, but she's ambivalent about it. Like you could see, like think about our own relationships and the things that we have accepted, but maybe like we make a concession even though it's not our preference. Part of that's marriage. I mean, many of you know a lot more about marriage than I do. But, I think we would all agree from our life experiences that marriage is like we all have our preferences, but you have to, there's trade-offs. You have to give and you have to get, right? Okay. So,
Rabbi Akiva would fall into that.
that's right. So you can imagine a situation where a woman says, okay, I understand that you want to be a Talmud scholar and you want to go away for more than 30 days, so I'm going to let you. But you can imagine that she feels ambivalent about it. It's what she concedes to, but it's not what she prefers. She could demand more, but she doesn't. And we've all been in relationships like that where we could demand, that, we pick up, that your husband picks up his socks or whatever it is, but then eventually it's like, okay, I make the concession. So what I want to point out again is this tension between the rabbis recognizing or trying to give primacy to Torah study, and then kind of like introducing that, juxtaposing that against this commandment for earthly pleasure and sexual obligations. And the rabbis are trying to work out a way to make both work, right? And then that's with the Talmud Torah, with the Torah study, but also with laboring and with driving camels and donkeys. The rabbis are like, we have to make the Torah livable. If a woman says that she has the right, like not all relationships are equal. If we're going to decide, like the Torah says, a woman has the right to sexual gratification, and we make it that it's once per week, well, that doesn't make sense for one law won't cover all situations. Life is different, and that's part of the Talmud, that, wait a second, someone who's a 9 to 5 job that's always local is different than a sailor who's not going to be home. They can't do once a week. They just can't, they're not physically present. Bridget, you had something.
It's
That's right.
Pages and pages to find the minimum thing for a chocolate chip cookie.
That's right. So the rabbis are very concerned about boundaries and distinctions. So they need to know there is a clear delineation between what's acceptable and what is forbidden, right? So they want to say like that. They do that all the time to say, oh yeah, like you can make a vow or you could abstain, you could go and study Torah for a little while. Well, that's not very helpful. Tell me how long I can go for. Exactly. Not because because there's you're trying to determine law. And the clearer a law is, the better a law is. And that's what and a clearer regulation is, the better the regulation is. You may disagree with it, but at least the clarity is important, because the worst part is when there's ambiguity. Oh, I don't think I went away for 60 days. I didn't think it was that long. Right? So to know exactly, that's very important. That's very rabbinic. The rabbis want to figure out like what is the outer limits, what are the inner limits of any situation.
Does this come with an instruction for the man?
There are no instructions. Well, yeah, there are some instructions, but not today. We could do that, the instruction. It's the Karma Sutra of the Talmud. Okay. Now what I want to do is to show, again, this situation of, okay, you could have permission, but that doesn't mean that that's still working. And here's a very sad story that occurs, and I think is a rabbinic warning. I think the rabbis are aware that by saying you can go away 30 days and you don't have to ask your wife for permission. First of all, it's not like a very good idea. Like, I've been married, like, I know that that's probably not going to, that's not really good for relationship building. But this is really kind of presumptuous. Not presumptuous. I mean, this is saying, okay, if you get her permission, you can go away for whatever you want. And someone said, what about, that's the Rabbi Akiva example, and some of you are aware of that story. He disappeared for years on end. Years. And like in the story, and it sounds good, like you start hearing this in yeshiva, his daughter, Rachel, was, not his daughter, his wife, Rachel, was so pleased that he went away once for 12 years, and then he came back. And he came back from the yeshiva and said, I need to go away for 12 more years. And she said, go, because that is the virtuous thing to do. And yeah, like that's a great story for yeshiva. Yeah, try that in real life and you'll see how that doesn't end you in divorce court. But I think the rabbis want to give a warning to people who are thinking about Talmud Torah, about learning Torah, and the ramifications. Even if something is legal, it could still be destructive, right? You could still disappear. For 30 days, you don't need permission. You could disappear if you have her permission, no limits. You could go study in yeshiva for as long as you want. Well, that's another thing. There's another thing that's forbidding on that. But if she gives you permission, you can go legally. But I think that the rabbis of the Talmud realize that that actually doesn't work. They realize that people in real relationships make concessions that are ultimately destructive. I'm sure that we all can sit here and think about our lives, about a painful concession that we made in a relationship, and that if we had a chance like that, it probably wasn't the best choice. So keep that in mind.
I used to send my husband every year back to Israel when his mother was living for at least 30 days so he could visit everyone. It made me feel good to make him happy.
Right.
But I was very happy when he came back.
You were very happy when he came back. Yeah, sure. But we can all imagine that there are times that we say, oh, I understand you needed to be out of town, and it wasn't good for the relationship. Okay, so I want to read this story. I really like to read the story. Go ahead, Zissel. Zissel, go ahead. You haven't popped up in a while. Go ahead.
I used to work for the Navy.
Yeah, Zissel, you're like the guy who gets up every time. You got.
That's right. Yeah.
Go ahead, give it to him.
I used to be a sprinter, so I have to run. Huh? Yes, I used to be a sprinter. Okay, so I'm used to walk and run and all that. Anyhow, I worked for the United States Navy for 27 years. I travel a lot, and some were short trips, a week. But whenever I had a trip, a long enough trip, I always took my family with me. Okay.
You always take his family with him.
So I always made arrangements that when I go, I didn't go that many times, but when I went for a long period of time, forget it. My family come with me, my son, my wife, everybody, and
Depends on where you're assigned and how long the assignment is.
that is correct. Depends where, but when it's a long one, most of the time, I had my family with me. Short stays, a week, 10 days. No, I do that by myself. I stay in bachelor's office, and but that's the way it is.
Okay, so Zissel is saying, wait a second. He recognized the importance of staying with his family. By the way, since we've made you the synagogue board, there's a new, like whenever the rabbi has to go to Israel for longer than 5 days, he has to bring his family along with him, company sponsored. No? Okay, you're not going for that one? All right. Okay, we'll try next year. Okay, here we go. So here's a story where you assume that well, here, we're going to read this story. You're going to give me some interpretations. Then I'm going to collect these. We'll read the story again next week, and then we'll read the creative writing piece on it. And that's how we'll finish this semester. So this is a statement. There's a description on page 3. There's a place above it where it's debating this, how long can you go without permission? So it's not clear, but let's just say, so here's this is as it was related about Rav Rechumi, who would commonly study before Rava in Mechoza. So Rav Rechumi was a rabbi, and he wanted to study before the great Babylonian rabbinic sage Rava. So he would go to Mechoza. He was accustomed to come back to his home every year on the eve of Yom Kippur. By the way, what an interesting time to pick right. Think about that. There are 5 forbidden things on Yom Kippur: food, drink, blah, 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 and sex. So he came home on the one day that he's not allowed to have sex. So there's a little, and then it's kind of funny also that his name in Aramaic means love, Rabbi Love, but the story gets tragic. This is the story about Rabbi Rechumi, who would commonly study before Rava and Mechoza. He was accustomed to come back to his home every year on Erev Yom Kippur. One day, meaning on Yom Kippur, he was particularly engrossed in the halakha he was studying, and so he remained in the study hall and he did not go home. His wife was expecting him that day and continually said to herself, "Now he is coming. Now he is coming." But in the end, he did not come. She was distressed by this, and a tear fell from her eye. At that exact moment, Rav Rechumi was sitting on the roof in his yeshiva. The roof collapsed under him, and he died. And that's the end of the story. So, what do you think about this story? Thoughts, reactions? Raise your hand. Bad timing. What do you mean? Well, if he came later, it was done. So he should have come sooner. He was punished because he caused distress to his wife. Good. You're not supposed to make your wife cry. Okay. And oh, good. The wife is also punished because now she's been saying maybe he's going to come now, maybe he's going to become now, and he's never going to come now. Oh, that's a really interesting point. And well, she doesn't need a get. He's dead. He died. She's waiting. Presumably, this is a case where either she's given permission for him to be away, but it's reluctant, right? Now there is a minority opinion that he could have gone away for several years. That wasn't in the Mishnah. But it seems more that this is a situation where she gave him permission to be away for all this time. And she just wants him to come home. And then he doesn't. And he starts crying. And then he dies. It's a horrible story. Terribly sad. Other thoughts about this? Yeah, it seems like that this is like the rabbinic warning label. Berna said that maybe this is the. It's sort of saying that studying Torah is maybe like you can't disqualify your obligations to your family, and so this is a rabbinic warning label that even though you legally can kind of like do a lot. And the rabbis, the cultural thrust of that society, the rabbis who are writing this, they want more students. They want more people studying Talmud. They want to create more opportunities for people to get away. So they put this, with permission, no limits. You could go 30 days without even asking. You can even go longer than that. You just got to get permission. You got to get a concession from your wife. They seem though at the end, they realize, wait a second, let's put a warning label on this. You do this, you go away without permission, you're going to cause pain, even inadvertently. Because Rabbi Rechumi, whose name is love, forgets to give love to his wife. He's not poorly intended. He doesn't seem like he's not a considerate man, but he's not a bad man. He's trying to learn Torah. He became so engrossed in the idea, he forgot. He didn't try and hurt her. But in getting lost in this religious ideal, he didn't realize that his actions had consequences. And there she is saying, Hashta ate. Now he is coming, Velo ata, but he did not come. He's unaware that his zeal with which he approaches religion has a price. Just like we talked about the concessions that we've made in relationships, romantic or other, it doesn't just, there's a price to pay. And so at the end, she's distressed. And then he's on the roof. That's not something weird, by the way. The roof in that society in the ancient Near East was flat. And often, especially at this time of year, you'd go out on the roof when the weather cooled down. So it's in fall, like that's a place where he would have gone. But it's almost like, oh my gosh, like you forgot about your wife. It's Yom Kippur. All right, Susie, you had a point. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Hanging out on the roof is very normal. Now, I wondered that when it says that the roof collapsed under him and he died, like, I don't know, like I imagine, did he commit suicide? No. Yeah. So usually the roofs have very strict legal requirements. Like, no, in those days especially. Like you have to, these are in the Torah, like putting up, because people used to be on the roof, and so they used to know that the roof needed, so you have like very, very strict requirements for how roofs needed to be built in the Talmud. So it's interesting that he goes to the roof and then he dies, but maybe it goes to show the power of her tears. Like her tears are so strong that her pain reverberates through miles and miles away and collapses the foundation of his life until he dies. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Zissel.
Simply an object lesson to teach everybody, don't cause grief.
Yeah, maybe. Don't cause grief is the lesson. Like, you may be allowed to do it, but it's not advisable, right? It's like the warning on cigarettes. Yeah, you can smoke cigarettes, but it's not really not advisable. Okay. Next session, we're going to reread this story. I'll say a few things about the story, and then we're going to read a creative piece written based on the story. Okay? Just pass it up here. I'll keep them. I'm happy to keep them, okay? And then have a great day, everybody. For those of you, Esther Spector, who's still in recovery, this is the directions to her residence. So 5 minutes if anyone wants to go visit her. We'll leave it right over here. Okay.
I went to visit last week.
Oh, you did?
She had the second one. She had one about a year ago, and then she had one not feeling. Huh? I know, and she's doing. She's fine. In that you can talk to her, and she's aware and everything.
Warren and Melinda, I have to take a phone call. I'll be right up with you, okay? All right. Okay, great. Okay. All right, bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, Ray.
Cecil, I know that you're a happily married man, but I'm going to tell you something. I think you're adorable. There you go. I like you. I'm very glad.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
What?
You said something.
No.
Oh, okay.
I just took a deep breath. That's
Okay,
it.
no problem. No problem. I thought I didn't hear something. No,
You
no
did
problem.
hear something. I took a deep breath.
Have a good one.
specific